Hello, my friends. Welcome. My name is Joe. This is the Joe Martino Show. And today we're going to talk about something that you do every second of every minute of every day of every week of every month of every year. And that is utilize constructs. We're going to talk about some questions that we can ask ourselves to really utilize this psychological happening so that we can live lives that we really find meaningful. Let's kick it off. This is the Joe Martino Show.
You're listening to The Joe Martino Show, a podcast dealing with all things emotional, relational, and human nature. Joe is a licensed counselor in the state of Michigan, specializing in relationship therapy. He is also the author of the book, The Emotionally Secure Couple. All advice offered in this episode is offered for entertainment and educational purposes only. Enjoy the show.
All right, so hello. I hope that wherever your day is, whatever's going on, your day is going great. Lots to talk about today. I want to talk about constructs. In the past, we have talked about mental models. You might remember that. If you don't, that's okay. Mental models was actually episode 125, and this is probably going to be like episode 267. So we have been spending some time together, if you remember that episode. And if you don't, that's fine. If you were around for them. One of the things I found interesting was 95% of podcasts don't make it past episode 100. I don't know. I didn't research that. I saw it on a statement. Someone stated it because they were interviewing a local dairy farm. I think he's a dairy farmer. Yeah, Swiss Dairy would be dairy farmer. Yeah. Anyhow, I'm winding down there. But so we are actually, 140 some episodes past that now. But we talked about mental models. Mental models are how we find our place in this world. And what mental models do is they help us understand where we're at. One of the best examples of that I don't know that I did in the show was your nose. Do you see your nose? The truth is you always see your nose. Whether you know it or not, you always see your nose. Your brain just discounts it because it's not necessary for your brain to understand where you're at regarding the world, like where you're at in the road, where you're at in a room, all of those types of things, how you fit in with people. There's another side of mental models that I want to talk about today, and those are constructs. The constructs that we make of other people are really important because what they do is they start how we interact with other people. They become the basis for how we interpret what those people do. They become the basis for how we attach meaning to what they do, right? And there is a difference there between attaching meaning and interpreting what they do. Interpreting is just looking at what they do and being like, okay, so they like, this guy likes the White Sox because he's got a White Sox hat on, which isn't true at all. I'm wearing a White Sox hat on because it's my daughter's boyfriend's team, and we're going to go watch them play, and so I bought one so that I can, fit in and feel like my mental models work, my social constructs work. People have social constructs of counselors. They have social constructs of me, of what I believe, what I think about the world, because I'm a counselor. That's a social construct. These are our cheat codes or life hacks for life. They are how we process things quickly. And we need these constructs. We need these systems in our brain that help us process information quickly. When you think about it, our world is full of more and more information. We are inundated with information. We are inundated with stimuli. And so our brain sets ourselves up to do it quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker. In fact, just last night I was doing a marriage group and we were talking about how we communicate and what that does. And one of the things that we don't think a lot about is the intentionality of listening and how that can actually turn an entire conversation one direction or another. And I don't actually mean active listening, the look in the eye and shake the head up and down, which by the way, a lot of research is saying is not helpful. But the listening of how we interpret, and do we check our constructs for veracity, for accuracy? Those are important questions that we have to ask. So the first thing we have to do is we have to be aware that we have these constructs, that by and large, we're constantly categorizing what's going on around us. We're categorizing it, the events that are going around us, right? You think about this when you're driving, you see gas stations, you see stores, and you're just categorizing them. And there's no right or wrong to this. It's just how we operate. It's just how we live. We're just categorizing left, right, down there, car coming this way. when you're driving, your brain is constantly cataloging and categorizing the cars around you for some threat level. That is one of the ways that we do our construct is we're looking for threats. And this is perfectly normal. Understanding our world around us is normal. Wanting to categorize things and catalog things is normal. It's how we process. It is developed through the history of our humanity, understanding where we're at. And you'll see this in conversations about type 1 and type 2 errors and those types of things. Our brains want to make sense of the world around us. That's where these come from. They want us to understand things. And a lot of times things happen that we don't understand. A lot of times things go on that we're not sure we process correctly. A lot of times things happen and we're like, I don't really get what that means. And so our brain just seeks to make sense of it. And we've talked about this in the past. If you have two pieces of information, right? Imagine, just two blocks standing up and you have two pieces of information, but there's a gap between them that you don't understand. Your brain will fill in the gap and it will give you a cognitive reward. In other words, it feels good simply for filling in the gap. Accuracy does not factor into the reward. Accuracy does not factor in to how rewarded you feel. You feel rewarded because you filled in the gap. And in a lot of ways that makes sense, but it can also be something that we have to be aware of. It should be something that we have to stop and consider, and we need to consider the veracity of the fill-in. When it comes to constructs that we're talking about today, one of the things that I often hear is people kind of push back on the idea that they have a construct and they'll get upset because they somehow think it's bad. They think it's, I'm saying they're racist or I'm saying that they're, stereotyping people. And I'm actually not. What I'm actually saying is what I think is going on is your brain is working very hard to find its understanding of how the world around it is working. And when we can accept that, we can then begin to process for change. We can then begin to ask ourselves, what are the constructs I have? And you think about this. When I'm at the gym, there's a construct in place. I'm going to go to that piece of equipment, but I see this guy walking towards it. My mind can run out the path that he's taking and assume that he's going to end up there where I'm going and then make a change. Or my mind can be like, oh, he's not going where I'm going, and I go there. When you're driving, we do that. When we're in the grocery store, we do that. When we're at the restaurant, we do that. There's a flow to most restaurant service. There's a flow to your meal at home. In fact, constructs are what we use to better understand language, to interpret language. Okay, so then what's the deal, right? Like, why are we talking about it? Well, here's one of the things that happens. I have a friend. I don't know if I'd call him a friend. I have an acquaintance who is friends with a guy that is friends of mine. And this acquaintance is very, very well known in his circles, very popular, a best-selling author, made movies or short films. He's done a lot of things where a lot of people have found impact. And people have constructs about who he is. And he's not that person. This is the danger in it. When you're sitting somewhere and you're listening to someone talk, we make constructs about who that person is. Here locally where I go to church, our church is probably one of the bigger churches in the area. And I've known our teaching pastor for a long time. We'll just say that. We were in college together. There was a time where we didn't know where we knew each other, but we weren't in the same town. We've lived now in the same town for many years. And I listen to people talk about who he is, and I'm like, that's not actually who he is. And I want to be careful here because one of the things that certainly people like them who are very popular, very public speakers, that they struggle with is that can be frustrating because what happens when the person realizes that the construct they have created for the person isn't real? That's what we need to figure out. And this happens really across a lot of different ideologies. This happens across a lot of different issues. When you think about things like politics, we tend to create constructs of people who have certain political ideology. If someone says, well, I don't think Trump was all that bad, most people have a construct about that person right away. If someone says, these are my pronouns, a lot of people are going to have a construct about those people one way or another. And here's the question: how charitable are our constructs? One of the most fascinating things to me to watch is how people interact with sports. And this is not me bashing sports. I want to be clear on that. But NASCAR is fascinating to me. I enjoy racing. I enjoy watching people race. I enjoy watching people push engines to the limit and try to go fast. But one of the things that's always interesting to me is people talk about certain NASCAR stars like they're one of them. You know, the guy living paycheck to paycheck is going to give up a paycheck to go watch his favorite NASCAR driver race because his construct is that driver is just like him. And he's not, because he's not living paycheck to paycheck. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Our constructs can overlap each other, right? And so when we start, especially when we start interpreting people, we want to be really careful to examine the construct that we're using and to examine the overlapping constructs to make sure that we're not looking at what might be considered confounding variables. In other words, we want to be careful to make sure that we don't have something that is affecting both sides of it. And so maybe you have a bias against conservatives, or maybe you have a bias against liberals, or maybe you think that all cops don't like black people, or maybe you think that all black people don't like cops. And here's the thing, we live in a world where we don't explore that much. I feel it, so it's true. But is it? Because here's the thing, remember, we're going to get a reward. We're going to get a cognitive reward. We're going to feel good for filling in the variable. Oh, he's a preacher, so he must hate me because I do blah, blah, blah. Right? Confounding variables, what they do is they correlate positively or negatively with both the dependent variable and the independent variable in study. In other words, they correlate either way, good or bad, with the thing that we're holding as our control group and the thing that we're actually putting something on to change. And so when we have constructs that are leveled, what happens is we're trying to make sense of the world, and it's often based on past experience. But things change. People change. And not only that, but people are messy. People are complicated. And people rarely all fit into this neat little box. And while our constructs are incredibly valuable, that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to put people in boxes so we can better operate through the world, so that we can get through our day. And so we create these constructs of people, and we don't necessarily create the opportunity for that construct to be wrong. And to borrow from my earlier illustration of the public speakers, we tend to assume that what we construct of them, how we view them, is accurate. For really no reason. There's zero empirical evidence to suggest we should go that route. There's zero empirical data to suggest that what we believe about them is accurate, that the construct we keep about them is accurate. In fact, I was at a conference this summer, and the guy was talking about when he was a kid, he was very under-resourced, and he was poor. He grew up in a poor home, and he went to a school where most of the people weren't. And he was talking about this opulent wealth they had. And he's like, because they drove these fancy cars. And then he put up a picture of the car, and it was one of those old wood panel minivans. That was the car. And he created a construct out of it. These people are wealthy. Constructs create our definitions. And so I see this a lot in two areas. One of the areas, and when we talk about a student wanting to make change, I remember this when I was a kid. I guess I was a kid. I was in my 20s. But when I was in my early 20s and I was working with students far more often than I do currently, one of the things that we talked about a lot was there are certain students that reach a point where change in the school system that they're in is very difficult because everyone around them has created a construct to keep them where they're at because it helps everyone around them be comfortable in how life works. In other words, that's what they did in 8th grade and 7th grade and 6th grade, so that's who they are in 9th grade. But think about how much you change from 9th grade to 6th grade or 6th grade to 9th grade. Think about how much change happens in that time frame. And there are certainly students that, they do well and they change, and there are other students do well in accepting that change. It happens with people who move away. One of the things that I found very frustrating earlier in my career as a counselor was I would run into people who I hadn't seen in 10 years, 15 years, And they would say, yeah, it's like you always say. Da, da, da. I'm like, yeah, man, I don't say that anymore. They would be like, oh, yeah, you know what? I quoted you. And da, da, da. Yeah, but I don't believe that anymore. But their construct kept me wherever they knew me 10 years, 15 years ago. I see this with adult parents and adult kids because the adult kid moves out of the house, they move on, and what happens is the adult kid changes. The adult child grows. The adult child morphs, or the adult parent morphs. The adult parent changes. But they both have these constructs of 18, 19, 20 years, 22 years of living together of how things work. The great danger of constructs is think about how much you've changed in the last 10 years. I always ask people, just however old you are right now, do you believe everything that you believed 5 years ago? How likely is it that you'll believe everything that you believe today in 5 years? Probably not high. And constructs rarely make room for that change. And so if we want to be better communicators, if we want to be better cultivators of relationship, if we want to be better people who are interacting with people around us, we have to figure out ways to examine our constructs. We have to understand that our constructs are not bad. They're good. They help us. And they can hurt us. Like almost anything that can help us, they can hurt us. And so how do we navigate those constructs? How do we wrestle with them to the point where we're probably uncomfortable so that we can be people who cultivate deeper relationships, who grow stronger connections? Constructs serve so many valuable purposes. I mean, even down to simple things like sports. People who don't understand sports, what they're really saying is I don't have a construct to make this make sense. I mentioned earlier that my daughter's boyfriend is a baseball player, and so she's gotten in a little bit to watching baseball with me, which does this daddy's heart good. And it's funny because when we talk about it, she tries to understand it, and she talks about the terms, but terms only have value and meaning when we have a construct for them. But what we want to do, if we really want to be, you know, what I often say is ninja communicators, is we want to then talk about what happens if the structure that I have to understand what's going on isn't accurate. What happens if the construct that I have to understand the terms being used isn't accurate? Can I live in the distress of that? And can I then explore, have a mindset of curiosity to reform my construct? Can I have two constructs that seem to exist in tension and be okay? Those are the types of questions that we want to pursue for really strong relational health and mental health. All right, I hope you like this episode. I hope it introduces an idea to you that is new, maybe something you haven't considered, or maybe something you have considered but didn't have words for. If you're finding value with this, I would really love for you to share it with your friends. I had a guy tell me recently that when I ask for you to share this, he doesn't really think that I am asking you to share it because I want to help people. I'm asking you to share it because I want to make money off of it. The truth is I make no money off of these. These cost me quite a bit of money. These are a labor of love. No money is made off of these podcasts. So if you enjoyed it, please share it with your friends. If you found value in it, please share it with your friends. Thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share with a friend. And hey, give us that rating in your podcast store. Until next time, change possible.